Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hearing News. Kia ora, Chewy.
Good evening, Pat. I'm in
You
the
doing
buzzer.
well? Good to see you. Yeah, on in the buzzer. As the credits were rolling, in fact. How are you, man? All well?
Yeah, not too bad.
Let me say, let's rip into this pretty soon and early today by saying we're looking for your help. If you are watching us right now, if you're watching us in the future, and this video may well be taken down, more about that shortly. So if you're watching us live, this might be the only chance to get to hear this. And you'd consider voting for us for the New Zealand Podcast Awards. All the links have just been put into the chats of all the places we're being played right now. And you need to nominate us with a link to one of our audio podcasts, which is also in the descriptions that we've just put into the chats. If you would consider going to nzpodcastawards.com and nominating us for the Listener's Choice Award, we would be grateful. Now, Chewy, why will this video possibly get taken down in the future? Because we're going to play some of John Oliver's bit about New Zealand birds competition tonight. Because
this motherfucker, he's chosen a position.
I actually think it's actually a spectacular thing he's done. Not just like, it's like this, right? I listened to Bert Kreischer and Tom Segura do a podcast. And they've got to this thing where they spend as much money as they can on each other for their birthdays, and it ends up being just a big joke. But there are people with lots of money who then kind of waste lots of money for the sake of a joke. And it's actually beautiful. You don't get frustrated or angry with them because they're wasting all this money. It's just like a beautiful thing. What you've seen with HBO and Last Week Tonight is one of the best jokes I've ever seen when money was no object.
Oh, yes. Yeah. John Oliver's great for this. He's spent some epic amounts of money on just trolly shit. I love it.
No, 100%. So money is no object. So what do they do? Now, this hasn't been broadcast as clearly as this on any other New Zealand media. We claim fair use right now, YouTube. Let's get those words into our algorithm. Fair use as a news commentary show. But the best, everyone will have heard about this and seen clips from this, but if you haven't seen the whole episode, the best thing that Last Week Tonight did was the advertising campaign. So he does a full segment set up about, that every year we do this thing, it's the bird of the year. And this is I don't understand why we're doing the fucking bird of the century in 2023. That's what I don't understand. But apparently this year, it's bizarre, isn't it? I thought that would be the running gag all the way through, but he never mentioned it. But it is, they have managers so like someone or some group will get behind the little spotted kiwi, and someone will get behind the tui, and someone will get behind the kakapo, and like a group will be the manager for it. So he's decided to be the manager for the putekiteki, right? And as the manager, he has quite literally set off a worldwide advertising campaign. Quite literally. It's gone around the world, not just because his show goes there around the world. Let me play this little 60 seconds for you.
First, we put up ads in New Zealand promoting the Putekiteki as Lord of the Wings, which is already
Wellington Harbour from the looks of
Did
things.
not stop there, because remember, the potential voters are every single inhabitant of Earth. So for the last week, there's also been a bunch of billboards up in the centre of Mumbai, India. Look at them. There they are, a city of over 12 million people. That's a lot of potential votes right there. We also designed this striking animated ad for Japan, which we then managed to put on 4 billboards in the centre of Tokyo, in the so-called busiest crossing in the world. So hopefully that should bring in a few votes too. Now, we tried to get this poster put up in Paris, but they wouldn't do it because the bird was smoking, and apparently cigarettes are banned in advertising there, which seems a little ridiculous considering the entire population of France smokes. So we reluctantly tweaked it and put this non-smoking version up on the Champs-Élysées, right next to the Arc de Triomphe, which has frankly never looked better. Meanwhile, in London, we made this mobile ad telling everyone there to help us crown a real king, and drove it right past the Houses of Parliament and all around the city. And if you're thinking, well, that's great, John, but what about Brazil? Surely you did something in Brazil. Don't worry. If you were on Ipanema Beach this week, you might have seen this plane flying around with a vote for the Puteki Teki ad hanging right off the back of it. And finally, just to push us over the top, we also put up this billboard in Manitowoc, Wisconsin. Because, hey, not everyone lives in big cities, do they? And if you live in Manitowoc...
So you said something last week when we were talking about something which was game recognises game. So you got to say, and like we're not going to play the rest of this now, obviously, but look at the puppet they built as well. Look at the size of it. It's like there's something beautiful about an unlimited budget that gets spent primarily for the reason to make a gag. India, Japan, England, Brazil, New Zealand, USA, adds up all over the place. It's utterly genius. And yeah, and because I guess Forest and Bird have made the mistake that you are allowed to enter from anywhere in the world as long as you have a genuine email address, I suspect we have our winner somewhat, because last year's winner had under 3,000 votes. So I'm thinking we have our winner for this year, and it's a beautiful thing. And it's nice to start the show with a beautiful thing, because we are going to be talking about some pretty heavy things tonight. But sometimes we say stay with us, and we'll give you a bucket full of sloths at the end of the night. I guess at the start of the night tonight, we've shown you an absolutely brilliant gag by John Oliver.
I'm a big fan of John Oliver's show. I absolutely am. It's part of part of the reason why I tune in every week is basically it's a deep dive into something that is completely broken in America, and he's been doing it for 5-6 years, and he hasn't run out of things to talk about. So it's nice that he has acknowledged what a ridiculous little country we are and what stupid bullshit we can come up with. It's glorious.
But just think of it's not even the money of the advertising. Every one of those things, someone also videoed it and then sent that video. So they would have had I'm assuming there's not HBO offices in every area. So they would have had to hire an independent cameraman to film that, to send it to them. They'd have to pay for the advertising themselves. They'd have to probably use advertising agencies. It's just chef's kiss. Mwah. It's just beautiful. Yep. Well done.
Absolutely.
Well done. So a nice little light-hearted way to start the show. And now we move into our hour of death and depravity. Yay.
Oh, just first, one other piece of light bullshit.
Yep. Oh, where are we at?
All right. 5 days, no coalition.
So this is day 6, isn't it? Yeah. I read a headline on News Talk TV last night that said Winston had talked about sitting across the benches again. So... Again, that's come up. That was come up after I got off the show last night. It was a fairly new headline. So we'll see. Mr. Luxon, who was so grumpy about the votes taking such a long time to come through, seems to be taking a sweet fanny time on actually forming a government now that they are through. I actually heard a commentator say, talk about Germany. It takes weeks to months sometimes. Imagine that. It's almost like
5 months.
It's almost like Luxon and National have gone off on Labor and the Labor government for not being able to do all these things, that as soon as they're approaching that seat to sit in, it's evident that they can't do them either. Every bit of criticism they've thrown at the moment, they've been similar to, even if it's a legislative change, like for example 3 Waters, which they seem to be wanting to ram through just exactly as it was, less co-governance.
Oh, look, these guys are breaking land speed records and backpedaling. It's amazing. Like Winston said, we'll actually do it very, very quickly. And now he's going, well, we're super quick compared to Germany, which took 5 months.
Yeah.
So anything's good, really.
Yeah.
Just a joke.
I'm going to start with a real quick one because, again, Chloe Swarbrick's featuring pretty heavily in the show. But I noticed a headline today, again on News Talk TV, just by coincidence, and it said that Chloe Swarbrick has apologised for From the River to the Sea chant. And Menendez March declines to comment. Now, this is the story. I'll just read it to you because it's small. Green Party MP Chloe Swarbrick has apologised, quote, to all those who felt offended, end quote, by her use of a controversial pro-Palestinian phrase that academics and political and community leaders have called divisive and inflammatory. There should be a some in there somewhere, some academics. Anyway, but Swarbrick has been coy on whether she'll use it again. Online reaction to Swarbrick's apology has been mixed, with one, I still don't get this, one X user, Twitter. When that gets put in there, I get confused every single time. One X user so this is again one of our biggest news sources using one source to pad out a story. One X user posting worst apology ever, and another posting, so she's sorry, not sorry then. It's interesting that they haven't gone and found supporters of Chloe on Twitter to see what they thought about it. Fellow Green Party MP Ricardo Mendes March failed to respond to questions from Newstalk ZB Plus. I don't even know what the fuck that is. What's Newstalk ZB Plus? Newstalk ZB Plus this morning
about more Hoskings.
About whether he would offer a similar apology and whether he would use the controversial phrase again. Why are they fucking asking him for an apology for something she said? But anyway, so Chloe has offered an apology somewhere. Now, I find it fascinating. If you go and search for Chloe Swarbrick apology, you find it at Newstalk ZB from 8 hours ago, and then nowhere else. Everywhere else seems to still be talking about the refusal, like here, refuses, declines to comment. Oh, that's the same one, sorry. So refusing to apologise for it. It's almost as if, Chewy, the media here in New Zealand thinks that putting the story out there about her declining to apologise or refusing to apologise will get them more clicks than her apologising. Because if you search for it now, the apology, it basically comes up on the Newstalk ZB page, and that's it. If you just search Chloe Swarbrick and from the river to the sea, it's all over the internet on all the news sources, and it's their latest story on her. So it's disappointing that if this is even what happened, if she has apologised, because I only found it there, that it's not had the same kind of, as they used to say in the olden days, column inches as the stories about her actually using the chant has taken up. But I guess that's the media.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting. Like when I saw that headline that she's apologized, at first I was like, "Oh, that's a shame. She shouldn't have to, and she shouldn't." But then again, I have full confidence that she'll be able to pivot it into something that brings it back on message again. That we need an immediate ceasefire over there. Immediate. Like stop crying about a slogan and fucking do something. Do something more.
Yeah.
You know, there's the rage that's out there over a slogan is not matched by the rage at what is actually happening now.
I think that's fairly evident. In fact, I had an interaction with someone who calls themselves, I don't know who it is, but calls themselves Left Foot Media, I think, on Twitter today. And they basically put up this commentary that, so what progressives are trying to change the conversation now and trying to blame everybody else for not making Chloe accountable for her words. Maybe she should be accountable for her words. And this is what my suggestion is. And I'm getting pretty pissed off that no one in the media is doing it. Because my question to this person on Twitter was, do you agree that right now Israel are committing war crimes? Because if the person says no, then that debates, there's no point having that conversation with them. And they came back with quite a long-winded conversation of basically saying, well, I wasn't there. How do I know? To which I then sent one more tweet, which was calling them a dishonest actor, because as soon as Israel tells civilians to move, that's collective punishment. That's a war crime. As soon as Israel acknowledges that they've bombed an ambulance, that's a war crime. There's nothing in the Geneva Convention that says you can't bomb ambulances unless they're carrying the enemy. There's no like subline to that. There's no caveat to that. So in other words, you don't have to be there, right? Because Israel has actually admitted to war crimes. Now, I then finished the conversation after telling this person that they were a dishonest actor by saying, it's easy. Let me show you. When Hamas entered the music festival, they committed a horrific act, a war crime. And right now, Israel bombing residential complexes is a war crime. See, it's not hard. But this comes back to this conversation we've been having. The more I see it, and I watched another clip from Piers Morgan today, we've got too much tonight to show it on, where the pro-Palestinian voice was saying all this is bad, denouncing this, denouncing that, denouncing the Muslim Brotherhood, denouncing Hamas, denouncing it all, and the pro-Israel voice refused to denounce Israel bombing civilians. It's really, really interesting, because, and I'm not saying this to necessarily, overtly, side on one with the other. I'm just looking at it from standing back, saying, I'll say it again. Pro-Palestinian commentators are denouncing Hamas. Pro-Israeli commentators are not denouncing Israel for bombing civilians. That's what I'm seeing across the media. And I'll say it again. You can find me on Twitter. In fact, we've got an email address now here for the show. You can find our email address. You can send me evidence if I'm wrong, because I hope there are some out there. I hope there's a pro-Jewish or pro-Israel commentator that is going, Israel are committing war crimes at the moment. I denounce the bombings of civilians, but I haven't seen it yet. Now, I hope there's one or two, but even if there is one or two, there's 100 or 200 others that aren't. Whereas I haven't seen the opposite. I haven't seen a pro-Palestinian voice. No, remember, I'm being careful on this, who is a commentator. I'm not talking about the general public. I'm not talking about anybody in the street who is employed or asked to come onto a media show as a commentator. I have not seen one yet who hasn't condemned the killing of 1,300 Jewish people. And it's becoming more and more strange that no matter when you say to someone, yes, Israel has committed war crimes, they've admitted to it, they still go, no, not gonna agree. It's talk about cognitive dissonance. It's just unreal. Sorry, there's a bit of a sidetrack there, Chewy. Yours, sir.
Yeah, no, you're allowed. I'll allow it. Yeah, like I have. I gotta be honest. I follow this. I follow the news quite tightly, and today was just a day that I just couldn't read any more about Gaza and what's going on. I just feel so impotent. I feel like people are just at saturation for horrible shit. We've had 2 years of war. And then now we've got another one that just seems to be more than war. It's just slaughter. It's just a genocide.
Yeah.
And every time this has happened, I've mentioned before, my mind goes to Bosnia, my mind goes to Rwanda, and we always go, oh, we've learned from this. It'll never happen again. It's horrible. How could this happen? We're watching it live.
Yeah.
And all of our leaders seem to be absolutely paralyzed and crippled by using the right words rather than a big old dose of reality and saying that this must stop now. We have the most powerful nation on the planet anchored off the coast watching. It's fucking ridiculous. And like we talked yesterday about holding two thoughts simultaneously.
Yep.
I'm a big fan of America supporting Ukraine and funneling as much weapons and support to Ukraine to defend their country as they can. And I fucking hate America for being absolutely impotent and just sitting there with two carrier battle groups. They could just go, if anybody moves, there is that much radar energy going on at the moment there that it'd be like trying to mug someone under a security camera.
Yeah.
Yeah. They have the ability to say to Israel, stand down, we'll make sure that nobody moves. Ceasefire. And they're not. It's a moral failure.
Couple of things. Tomorrow night, Marilyn Garson from the Alternative Jewish Voices is coming back on. So she'll be with us at 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Chewy's away tomorrow night, so I've got a couple of ideas for a co-host who will be joining me. I haven't approached them yet, so I won't say who it is, but I just want to go back to the start of this little side note. When you find that when you're having this conversation with people, and I would say this to media as well, if you haven't noticed this so far, I'm sure all of you have. You're a very smart group that watch this show. When a pro-Palestinian voice comes on, they always get asked to denounce the attacks of Hamas, right? But when a pro-Israel voice comes on, they never get asked to denounce the bombings of Israel, right? They never get asked. They might say something like, we have this sympathy for the biggest sympathy. We've got this, we've got that, but they never get asked the same question. So if you're a journalist watching this, and we know you all watch, hey Chewy, all of you, we all know, you must ask pro-Israel voices, do you denounce Israel bombing civilians? Do you think that Israel is committing war crimes right now? If you're having this conversation, non-journalists who are now watching, I know there's one or two of you who aren't journalists who are watching. If you're having this conversation with anyone, that's the first question. Is Israel committing war crimes? Now, what they'll do is they'll go, well, is Hamas? And the answer is, yeah. Now, is Israel? Because they think that they think that when you ask that question, what you're trying to do is you're trying to imply that Hamas is good and Israel is bad. No, we're not saying that. But we're just saying that those people whose heart are with the Palestinians are still saying those Hamas fuckwits are committing war crimes. Now, your heart is with the Israeli people. Fine, I get that. Is the government of Israel committing war crimes? And if they won't answer it, or if they say no, it's a pointless conversation. And as has been proven out by this conversation I had with whatever that media guy is on Twitter today, because after I restated that whole thing and said, now will you answer the question? It's gone silent. And it's been interesting to watch all the people on his Twitter feed come along and call him, I told him it was the utmost in cowardice to not answer the question and to try and say, how do we know? I wasn't there. That's what flat earthers do. I've never been to space, so I don't know if it's real or not. I've never been to Antarctica. I don't know if that's literally what they do. And that's when people do that, you go, well, Israel has admitted to at least 2 war crimes. Admitted to, and then of course all the other ones that are happening, like bombing civilians. Anywho.
Got a comment here I want to sort of maybe have we chat about as well, if that's cool.
Sure.
Peter Piper, when your citizens have been kidnapped, at what point should you say that we should stand down and hope they give them back? It's kind of an example of something being considered in a complete vacuum, isn't it? Like, when you look at things like hostages, say someone takes hostages. Look at your favorite hostage bank movie or something like that. If you're trying to get hostages out, you generally don't just start dropping houses. We've identified the hostage takers. We're going to go and blow up their house. And
also, where the hostages could be.
Yeah, in every case that I'm aware of, when there's been hostages taken and that sort of thing, and hostage taking has been, this isn't obviously isn't a new thing. Generally, there's a little bit more subtlety, deal making, or outright sneakery to get them back. Yeah. I don't think flattening an entire city full of women and children is probably going to prompt Hamas to come to the bargaining table. How are they even supposed to release them?
Yeah.
When the city's going to get flattened.
Can I ask Peter a question? Before I engage with you, Peter, and give you an answer, could you please tell us in the chat, are Israel currently committing war crimes against civilians in Gaza? When you answer that, I'll give you my response. That's all I want to know, Peter, if you're watching still. Is Israel currently committing war crimes? Anything else you want to say to Peter? Because I'll wait.
And I think the other thing here is, again, the danger is to look at this incident, this current week of violence and that sort of thing, in a vacuum. And the starting point is Hamas's attack. It's not in a vacuum.
Good. All right. So Peter has acknowledged that. So now we can have an authentic conversation. Because the point we were making at the start, obviously we think and have said several times, hostages should be released immediately and a ceasefire should happen. Now, what you're going to find is you've got 2 groups basically measuring their dicks, to use that saying at the moment, which is the IDF and Hamas. Someone has to make the first move. And I know everyone's going to say, well, why should it be Israel? It doesn't have to be Israel. Hamas could release the hostages. Would that stop the bombing? I don't know. Israel could stop the bombing. Would that get the hostage released? I don't know. That's the problem with this situation. There is evil on both sides, and they need to come to a room. One of the clips we're going to play tonight, Shane Tapo says, not too much of a spoiler, says as much as this is going to sort of get up people's nostrils, Hamas needs to be at the table to negotiate what happens from here on in. Just like the ANC was in South Africa, just like the IRA was in Northern Ireland. So no matter what you think of Hamas, they need to be a part of the conversation for the solution to this massive clusterfuck, because you can't do it any other way unless you just blow them to the ground, and then you're committing genocide on top of war crimes, and you'll probably have supporters of Hamas in the region actually at you for the rest of time, no matter what. I know Israel thinks that's already going to happen, but that will be an assured, guaranteed way that that will happen for the rest of time.
But my point of view is at this point the country with the most power, the most ability to defend themselves, the bigger person in the room has to be the one to make the first move.
Yeah.
And it could be something as much as a statement of going, okay, immediate ceasefire. The ceasefire will hold for 5 days. We want hostages back.
Yep. If you have a ceasefire for 5 days, what will break the ceasefire is any rockets from Hamas coming back over will be an immediate break of the ceasefire. And if we don't have the hostages, all of them back within 5 days, we will resume. There you go. That's not hard.
The ceasefire will be monitored by the US forces anchored off the coast with their radar and surveillance aircraft.
Yep.
US Marines will be deployed to humanitarian areas to render assistance and deliver supplies to civilians. Why am I coming up with the idea? Like surely there are people in more expensive suits than I that can come up with something like this. But a constant carpet bombing is not getting it done for anyone. It might create Israel a new car park, and it seems like some in their government, that's exactly what they want. But it is not solving a problem.
On that note, let's move into the first part of our conversation. So Anderson Cooper will explain it better than me, but to give you a preface, an intro, he had on with him today Emily Callahan. Emily Callahan is an American nurse who works with Doctors Without Borders. Now, today I contacted and spoke to Doctors Without Borders. There is a New Zealand group, part of them, New Zealand Outpost, whatever the correct word is. And I've requested someone to come on and talk to us about the humanitarian need in the region. They seem quite excited to get someone on, so that's great. I'm not saying that'll happen this week because tomorrow night's the last show of the week, but probably early next week. Anderson Cooper had on Emily Callahan. Emily Callahan is working with Doctors Without Borders as an American nurse, and she's been in Gaza for the last month, helping people. Really, that's probably all the setup I need to do. I'd like to just play this for you. We've got 3 clips to play from here, totaling about 5 minutes, maybe. And Chewy, anytime you want to jump in, just tell me to pause it, and I'll pause it. And you can jump in, or we'll check it out, and we'll hear her story, and then be back with you as the appropriate drop-ins need occur.
This is a video of the aftermath of a strike in the Al-Shati refugee camp in Gaza. According to journalists working for CNN, the attack came during intense Israeli bombing Sunday night. The IDF has not commented on the incident. United Nations officials today said 70% of people in the Gaza Strip are displaced, many living in conditions a statement called, quote, inhumane. The Secretary General said that Gaza is becoming a, quote, graveyard for children. Israel's ambassador to the UN last...
Can I just point this out as well, because we're going to hear from Damian Grant a bit later on. And he talks about the number of deaths being propaganda of Hamas, the number of dead people. This is the UN reporting, right? This is UN reporting. This is as independent as you can get in the region. This is not from Hamas. This is not from the IDF. This is from the UN. Gaza is becoming a graveyard for children. It's important that... I was saying to someone today who wanted to talk about the ambulances and, the Hamas using ambulances. I just said, can you send me some information that's not either Hamas or Israel, IDF, to confirm what you're saying? I am yet to get anything back from them. So I take the information coming out from Hamas very similarly to the information coming out from IDF as propaganda, but stuff from, the UN, BBC, other independent sources, I take it as more worthwhile. Not always perfect, but more worthwhile. Do you kind of do the same, Chewy?
Yeah, pretty much. Like as far as the ambulance thing, like the actual war crimes part is pretty clear. You cannot hit marked ambulances.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if they're literally stacked with Hamas fighters and guns. You don't hit ambulances, for the reason is you get it wrong. It's badly wrong. You think back to World War II and stuff like that. Both sides had clearly marked ambulances, and they were generally left alone. Same with hospital ships.
Yeah, and that's what I said earlier. There's no caveat that comes with that in the Geneva Convention that says you can't hit marked medical trucks unless they're carrying the enemy. It's just you can't. So it doesn't matter even if, because they've even said, even if they are ferrying Hamas around, even if they are, it's still a war crime. This is the point. Yeah. You don't have it's not like Monopoly when you get a get out of jail free. Here's your get out of war crimes card free. That doesn't exist.
If they're so sure that they're being used with Hamas, by Hamas, then they must have evidence, right? I assume surveillance, drone footage, that sort of thing. If you've got that level of intelligence, then you hit them before or after they're in the ambulance. You do not hit the ambulance.
Yep. All right, let's keep going with this golden fox.
Doubted those at the comments called for the Secretary General's resignation. Emily Callahan is a nurse, activity manager for Doctors Without Borders, MSF. She was evacuated last Wednesday and arrived back in the U.S. just over the weekend. First of all, how does it feel to be out?
A lot of people keep asking me that, and I really don't have a good answer. I obviously have a sense of relief that I'm home and I'm with my family and feel safe for the first time in 26 days, and I'm having a really hard time finding any joy in any of it, because me being safe is the result of having to leave people behind.
People watching this have seen images from Gaza. They've seen the hospital images. They've seen the horror of children dead day after day after day after day. I mean, they've seen all the images. But to actually be there and to experience it, you're experiencing all these things which a camera can never capture. So could you just talk a little bit about when you close your eyes at night, what is it you think about now?
I think the answer to that question, I'll start at KYTC, which was, we were relocated about 5 times over the course of 26 days due to security concerns. And one of the places we wound up was the Khan Yunis Training Center. We call it KYTC.
That's when people had evacuated to the south. So you were in the south of Gaza at that point.
Yes, when we went to below Wadi Gaza line. And by the time we left there were 35,000 internally displaced people living alongside us. There were children with just massive burns down their faces, down their necks, all over their limbs. And because the hospitals are so overwhelmed, they are being discharged immediately after, and they're being discharged to these camps with no access to running water. I
should have probably said this at the start, but as I watched Chewie react to that, there's some pretty graphic stuff in this, just in case, I know people laugh at the idea of trigger warnings, but there is some pretty, obviously no pictures, but what's explained and what she says and what she talks about is there's some pretty graphic stuff in here. I'm pretty sure you guys probably would have been aware of that, but just to make sure, in case anyone wasn't, it's disturbing what she tells.
Being discharged to these camps with no access to running water. There's 50,000 people at that camp now in 4 toilets. They're given 2 hours of water every 12 hours.
There's 4 toilets for 50,000 people.
Yes. And that's where we were living too. And they have these fresh, open burns and wounds and partial amputations that are just walking around these conditions. And parents are bringing their children to us going, please, can you help? Please, can you help? And we have no supplies.
So, part 1. Now, Chew, I've got 3 little parts to play. Do you want to jump in and say anything on the first part? The second part we're going to show is more about the Palestinian staff that was working with them, and also how she got out over the border. But there's sort of part 1. Thoughts?
I can't say this is. You can see with the pauses that she's taking.
Yeah.
To try and form her thoughts on the. Like I think this woman is. maybe days away from a breakdown. I think her head's still spinning from where she was compared to where she is now.
Yeah.
Like just far out.
Yeah. Well, you can gather your thoughts. We'll keep going and hear talking about the Palestinian staff that were there and also how they got out and got over the border.
Your staff, the Palestinians who work for MSF or Doctors Without Borders, were concerned about your safety.
We would have died within a week without them. They are the only reason we are alive.
It's incredible that this took so long to get Americans, sick people, start to move through that Rafah border crossing. It's inexplicable.
And we were desperate. We did a calorie count at one point based on our supplies and figured out that if all of us, there's 50 people with us living in a parking lot now, only ate 700 calories a day. If that's all we had 2 days of food left, and that's it. And our national staff took off. We had no cell service at that point, so we had no idea what had happened to them. There's bombs going off all around us because there's no safe place in Gaza.
Even getting through that Rafah border crossing, what was that like?
They didn't leave our side for a second.
The national staff?
The national
because
staff.
Because they feared for your safety, even at the border crossing.
They made sure they were standing between us and desperate people. They made sure that they were talking to every official that they could find, trying to push us through, trying to get us on the bus, trying to get us out. And we're standing there and we're watching these incredible men who have sacrificed everything for us, who have sacrificed time with their families, their own physical safety, their own water supply they were giving to us. And we're watching them fight to get us across the border, knowing that we were not bringing them with us. And they didn't waver. Ibrahim was right in the front with our passports, fighting so hard to get us on. And we get to Arish that night and find out his parents are dead. They were losing family members and friends.
You said if...
So, yeah, I mean... People in the chat are saying how emotional this is for them, and I guess you can see it. It's yeah. What can you say? I will just play the last little bit because I think this was a really important part of the conversation for the world to hear, because the narrative that we're getting on Western media is that Hamas is not allowing people to leave, plainly and falsely not the case, as we've just heard. But B, people who are choosing to stay, you know how Israel's saying, oh, you guys should leave because we're about to blow up your building. People are choosing to stay are sympathizers to Hamas, are supporters of Hamas, or are members of Hamas. She tells a story, or it's actually more of a throwaway comment to this, about the staff that she was working at, working with the locals, Palestinian staff she was working at, and why they won't leave. And you'll be surprised to hear, Chewy, it's got nothing to do with them being supporters of Hamas, and it's got nothing to do with Hamas holding them there. The staff of Doctors Without Borders in Gaza remain in that area. I'll let her tell the story, but for a very particular reason.
Would you go back to Gaza?
In a heartbeat. In an absolute heartbeat. My heart is in Gaza. It will stay in Gaza. The Palestinian people that I worked with, both our national staff in the office as well as my staff at Indonesia Hospital, were some of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life. When everything went off and we got the notice to move south of Wadi Gaza, I was texting my nurses at Indonesia Hospital and I said, we lost a nurse weekend one. He was killed when the ambulance outside the hospital was blown up. And I was texting them when we got the evacuation orders and I said, did any of you move south? Did any of you get out? Like, are any of you coming down this way? And the only answer I got was, this is our community. This is our family. These are our friends. If they're gonna kill us, we're gonna die saving as many people as we can. And I said, if I can ever have an ounce of the heart that you have, I will die a happy person. They were incredible. I would like to send out a reminder that there are civilians seeking shelter there and that my doctors and nurses didn't leave out of loyalty to their community. And I know that there is an idea being pushed right now that anyone that stayed behind is going to be considered some kind of a threat. And I want to remind people that the people that stayed behind are heroes. The people that stayed behind they know they're gonna die and they're choosing to stay behind anyway.
You're talking about doctors, nurses in the hospital?
I wake up every morning and I send out a text message and I ask, are you alive? And every night before I go to sleep, I send another message and says, are you alive?
There you go. So, first-hand account that some of the people working in the medical field, Doctors Without Borders, they're choosing to stay to look after their friends and their community, and they're choosing a death sentence. I mean, the way that Emily just talked there, they know that they're going to die. So you've got doctors and nurses who are choosing death to look after the sick, the ailing, the injured, rather than getting out. So the stories that we're hearing in the media, the narrative that some are trying to sell, that if you stay, it's either because Hamas are keeping you there or it's because you are part of Hamas or a supporter. Look, I'm sure that there is a percentage of the population that are that, but there is also a percentage of the population that are not. So no matter, and remember what people do in war, what groups do in war, I mean, we've seen it before in the 1930s, is they dehumanize and then it's easier to exterminate. If they can dehumanize Israel can dehumanize the population by saying, well, if they're staying, then they're aggressive fighters, then the rest of the world can go, well, those people had a chance. They're obviously Hamas aligned, and that's why they stayed. It's not the case. It's not the case always, is what we have to say. Any words, Chewy, or are you done?
Look, we can be real down on large media entities, and CNN is often a target of that. But that interview was something else.
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. I really don't. Doctors Without Borders have a long history of going to some of the worst places in the world and getting stuck between fighting sides, revolutions, natural disasters. These people go out of their way to put themselves in those positions to save as many lives as they can. And I have no doubt that they stayed as long as they possibly could. And I can't imagine what it would be like to look at the people that you've worked with and then go, well, I have to go and leave those people behind.
Some background on that. There's another part of the interview that I didn't play because we don't play the whole thing, we just play segments. But it was her talking about, what did they say? 50,000 people in 4 toilets. And obviously it became pretty desperate in there, and their lives became at risk from some of the people in the camp because people got desperate. People thought that they were infiltrators. People thought that because they weren't Palestinians, people thought that they could be, Jewish aligned. She says people kept speaking Hebrew to us to see if we'd answer, meaning we're Jewish, and so it became quite dangerous for them in the camp area as well. Although all they were trying to do is help, but also open sewers, 4 toilets, desperate people, parents wanting to save their kids, parents looking to blame for what's happened to their kids. You get it. So they were sort of forced to leave. So, but as you can see, she's asked, would you go back? How quick was that answer? Boom, in a heartbeat. I'd go back in a heartbeat. My heart is there. So yeah, this is something else. Now, I don't want to be conspiratorial and I don't want to be anti-Israel. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm thinking is you are getting these stories coming out from Gaza. We're not hearing any stories of, because the people are equivocating what's happening between Hamas firing rockets and Israel firing missiles. There are people like supporters of Israel who are equivocating. They're making them equal. We're not hearing any stories coming. And look, I hope we don't. I don't want to see pain and suffering for any citizens or any civilians, right? But we're not hearing stories coming out of Israel of, dire need, of desperation, of death, of any other D words that my radio brain's going to go to, because that's what it says it has to do now, another D word. And that says to me, in this age of social media and, 24/7 news, if those stories were happening, we'd hear about them. But we're hearing them time and time and time again coming out of Gaza, which means, again, that comes back to our disproportionate response. Yes, what happened on the 7th of October was an act of war. It was a war crime with what Hamas did. The civilians within Gaza shouldn't be paying the price as collective punishment by Israel for the war crime that Hamas committed. And it's currently the civilians that are paying the price. And that's why it's so cut and dry to me that Israel is committing war crimes. That's not even a judgment statement. I'm not judging them. I'm not siding. I'm just making an observational, factual statement. It's observable. And they are the ones with all the power at the moment. So coming back to that conversation of earlier of if there's going to be a ceasefire, of course it makes much more sense to start with the ones who it feels to me are disproportionately responding at the moment. Could it start with Hamas? Yes, it could. 100% it could. But Hamas is currently watching their city be flattened. I can understand there may not be some trust there that goes, if we release these hostages, maybe they think that's all they've got. The only leverage they've got in this current climate is those hostages. I don't want to make that sound like, so therefore it's 100% on Israel. It's not. But, if you're a 16-year-old male at school and you've got a full adult body and you get into a fight with a 10-year-old boy, and the 10-year-old boy refuses to stop, it's pretty easy for the 16-year-old to stop and step away from it and completely stop the conflict, the interaction, because you're bigger and stronger, you're smarter. Yes, the 10-year-old boy could stop trying to swing at you, but the 16-year-old boy, or let's say that the 30-year-old man, even better example probably, would find it much easier to stop that interaction like that as opposed to the 10-year-old boy. And that's kind of how it feels. Both could stop, but the 30-year-old man, I feel like, could more easily bring an end to that conflict. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like this is where we need our bag of sloths now, actually, because we're going to go from one to the other. What I will do, and I want to be sensitive with this because, there's been some lovely people giving us super chats and we don't want to sort of make it look like, give some, it's not the right time. So let's just stop that conversation and say, thanks to Nick for the super chat. We appreciate that. $5 super chat for his late fee. It's fine. Thank you for offering it, but we appreciate it. So Nick with your super chat. Also Anakihi, $2 super chat there. Luxon can't break his tax promise if he never gets in. Oh, he never gets in. How's he not going to get in?
Because they can't form a coalition government.
That is still a conversation that's being had at the moment. What's the possibility of a second election? I think that's basically zero. I think before you get that, you'll get one of the two minor parties sitting on the opposition benches but giving supplying confidence. I think that's far more likely than another. Because if it was down to one party forcing a second election, that party wouldn't exist anymore. It just wouldn't. Cools TV. Thank you for the super chat. It says, my heart goes out to the Palestinian people, but if Israel makes the first move to peace, as they should, and Hamas continues to attack in the future, where do we go from there? What do the West support? Look, I think people keep talking about Israel has the right to defend itself. I think we all agree with that. But the current situation is not defense. It's the definition of offense. You've gone into an area and you're just flattening everything in the situation. I'm also not going to sit here and say, oh, this is an easy solution, because it's not. The immediate conflict probably goes back 75 years. The conflict in the region probably goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. So no one's saying it's going to happen overnight. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you kill a quarter, a third, a half of the citizens in Gaza, do you think in the long run that's going to get you what you want of a peaceful region? Or do you think that that's possibly going to breed generations more of people who may actually want to be a part of Hamas or sympathize with Hamas? Because my brother, my sister, my child, my dad, my granddad, my grandmother, my great-granddad was killed in a situation that was war crimes by the guys over that border. You know what I'm saying? It's like, And I'm not, I want to make it really, really clear. I'm not lying all of this on Israel. If you were with us when I talked about the ceasefire, remember what I said was Israel could offer a ceasefire for 5 days. The conditions being if one more rocket from Gaza comes across, then the ceasefire is off. So that's me saying Hamas has responsibility. And if the hostages aren't out at the end of that 5 days, the ceasefire is off. I'm equally, okay, let's be fair. Gaza or Hamas, I should say, could say we're releasing one hostage and we expect 1 day of no fire. And if there's no fire, we'll release 2 the next day. Then we expect 2 days of ceasefires and 3. And they could do that too. But I think it feels so much easier, like the 30-year-old man stopping the fight with a 10-year-old boy, for Israel to go 5 days or whatever it is, 3 days, 7 days. I don't know, something.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm naive, but that's just how it feels to me, Joey.
No, it's... Yeah, I don't think anybody's looked at the Middle East and gone, there's an easy solution here.
But other than Donald Trump, who put his son-in-law in charge of it.
It's history. It's always history. European nations, Western nations have always interfered in the Middle East. Russians have interfered with the Middle East. Everybody's got an invested angle to take. Everybody's got pressures at home of how they should react in this. And again, come back to the problem. There's a woman and her kids in Gaza who is not to blame for any of that. Maybe she's got less kids than she had when this started.
Yeah.
That
horrible.
offends me.
Yeah.
Ricky that infuriates me.
Ricky 6foot says this, and I was just thinking about this as we were watching it. UN needs to send in peacekeepers. They're still in Sinai, Korea, were in Germany for decades. It's the UN's problem to solve. I guess, Ricky 6foot, I was thinking about the UN sending in people right now. The problem is, if UN sent in peacekeepers right now to that region, I would be concerned that they'd be in danger, because at the moment, Israel seems to be just blowing up everything. And Israel might say, well, it was just Hamas dressed in UN uniforms. Like they've kind of been saying about the ambulances. But if what you're saying is to solve this over the forthcoming days, weeks, months, years, decades, the UN needs to do it. Fair, I guess. But I just think it's not, doesn't sound like something in the immediacy.
That's what I want. Yes, one of the first things that the UN was involved with was the creation of the State of Israel.
Yeah.
I think there is a responsibility there. But then the bigger, well, first of all, you've got to get it past the Security Council. And America and Russia are just going to veto the shit out of everything.
Well, Biden's just called for a 3-day ceasefire. And Netanyahu said no. So
right. So is the US still giving them that aid package?
Don't know. Yeah, that's another thing. So
that's what
the US
it
could
be.
stop that. Yeah, for real.
That's what it should be. Like,
yep.
we offered you this and we want you to do this. And Netanyahu says to go fuck yourself. And then Biden goes, okay, well, we're going to give this to Ukraine. Here's our next request. 5-day ceasefire, or we send the Marines in. And then Israel's in the position of, oh shit, our biggest ally, our biggest supporter, our biggest source of funding is going to put boots on the ground to protect civilians in Gaza. That'll never happen. This is fucking Tom Clancy shit out the ass. But
because that would be almost taken as an act of war against Israel by some. So no.
But I just want someone to make a call like that and go, okay, you want to keep this fight on? Are you going to have a crack at, what's a reasonably big nation that's got a? Well, what if the French went in blue helmets? Because this is the thing, when you talk about UN peacekeepers, it takes so long to organize. First, there's got to be a binding resolution, then it's got to get through the Security Council, then you've got to find a nation that's willing to put its own troops and material on the line of fire. And it's got to be a country that isn't already compromised in that area. So who does that leave?
Yeah, but you talk about compromise. I mean, did you hear about Rashida Tlaib, the congresswoman in the US, got censured today, like an official censure, because she this is my understanding. I've actually done some Googling around what were the exact words that she said to get her censured. But what I can take from it is she explained, she's Palestinian, right? She explained that from the rivers to the sea starts was a freedom fighter. It wasn't talking about Israel's destruction. So what I can read online is that her explanation of that got her censured by all the Republicans and 37 Democrats. So that's what you're up against when it comes to the support of Israel in the American governmental system at the moment. So that's a pretty big hill to climb.
Everybody's so paralyzed. You know, it would be great if there was just an overall understanding from our country's leadership, and I'm not talking about specifically New Zealand, I'm just talking about countries in general, to go, well, fuck, no matter what side we stack on this is wrong. What is happening now is wrong. And that is the problem that we're going to solve, is we're going to stop kids getting blown up and burnt and starved and dying from disease in the coming weeks and that sort of thing. That's the problem that we're going to solve. The other stuff can get pushed to the side. We'll tackle that later. But the immediate problem is this. Like if it was a natural disaster. There's nothing natural about it, but it's sure as hell going to be a disaster.
Well, the other thing, I heard an American military commentator who wasn't necessarily pro-Palestine, but he brought out the point that the way America got bin Laden was with, was it SEAL Team 6 or something? Incursions into the area to fulfill the criteria they wanted. They didn't just go and flatten the city that Osama bin Laden was in. And maybe if it's really just about Hamas, if that's all it's about, yes, obviously it would put Israeli soldiers in more harm's way, but it would protect the civilians. And in war, that's what you're supposed to be doing. You're actively supposed to be protecting civilian lives. I don't know. It's just it's a clusterfuck and a half. And speaking of clusterfuck and a half, Damian Grant.
Is that convicted fraudster, Damien Grant? Well, it
I
seems
believe
like
so.
it. I've seen this picture on a story about fraud, so yes.
Now I know some of you in the chat have already been talking about this, and you saw this blimmin' kick off last night. So we've got Damien Grant, we've got Brooke Van Velden, we've got Shane Tapoe, and we've got Bomber having a conversation. And this was subject number 4. Subject number 4 for the night, talking about 10,000 dead Palestinians. We'll go through a few clips here, and she blows up pretty quick at the start. I'll play it for you.
Israel reached a grim milestone today of killing 10,000 civilians.
Bullshit.
And on that day, ACT attacked Chloe Swarbrick for using a rhyming chant they claim is anti-Semitic. Damien, what's the bigger crime here? 10,000 dead civilians or Chloe using a rhyme that Israeli apologists have claimed is anti-Semitic?
10,000 people haven't died. That's
Yes,
a
they
lie.
have.
You are believing
Oh, they
Hamas.
haven't.
Hamas is an
Hamas
organ.
has
Thousands
a
of people
strong
have died.
international
Thousands of people have
relationship
died.
with
Hamas-
that.
Thousands
Hamas-
of people have died,
once-
Damien.
once you-
Damien, thousands
once-
of people have died, and giving the demographics, fucking women and fucking children, and for you to diminish that, quite frankly, is unacceptable.
I am not diminishing it, sir. I am not diminishing
You
it.
are.
You are saying 10,000
No, I'm
civilians
not. No,
have
I'm
died.
saying-
no,
I
you're
didn't-
quoting
I
Hamas,
didn't- I
and
didn't-
Hamas is an
I
organisation
didn't
whose
say-
very existence is
I
predicated
didn't-
on killing Jews,
I
and that's fine.
didn't say 10,000.
No.
I'm saying
I'm over here saying
thousands.
10,000.
Thousands,
Jesus
and
Christ.
given the demographics of that open air fucking prison,
It is
in
not an open air
Of course
prison.
it is.
That's a
When you
lie.
can't get in and you can't get out.
Why can't you
and
get in?
When Israel
they
is
did
able to
get
turn
out.
off the water, the water,
did
the
get out.
power, the telco, you're in an
What
open
happened?
air prison.
I've been in an open air prison, Shane. It's not the same.
No, you haven't.
Yes, I have.
No,
what
you
happened,
haven't been in an open air
what
prison.
What happened when that border came down and Hamas were able to get out? What did they do, sir? On October the 7th, what did they do?
No. I'm not here to.
So this is the thing. This has got about another 60 seconds. I'll keep going, but a little bit later on, Damien Grant goes, "Whataboutism? Whataboutism? Whataboutism?" And what he's just done is whataboutism, because what he's just said is, "But what about October the 7th?" So what he's doing now is whataboutism. which he actually then accuses Shane of doing later on, like it's a defense. And as you see again, the pro-Palestinian voice always has to denounce the war crime of Hamas, which is about to happen, yet the other is not reciprocated. And this is just an example. I'm not putting Damian Grant up on any pedestal of significantly good, honest actor when it comes to commentators.
No.
But we've talked about this tonight. The pro-Palestinian voice, or even just the neutral voice. I don't want to put that on Shane. I don't know if he is, sided. He might just be in the middle and see it fairly. Always has to defend, always gets challenged to defend the actions of Hamas, but the pro-Israel voice never does. Do you want to say anything before we play the last? It's not even 60 seconds. Chewy?
Something quite remarkable has happened here, Pat. I over here where I am, inside me.
Okay.
Is I did not think it was possible to think any less of Damian Grant, but it's happened. It's like there's a floor that you thought was really solid. You just gave it a little whack. And it goes fucking deep, man. It's deep and dark. I detest this man.
And it's the point that he was making about it's not 10,000 people. It is minimizing it. Because so what? It's 9,100. It's 8,400. What's the fucking difference? Is it 11,000? And he's saying, and this is the thing, right? I've said this already tonight on the show. I would take everything coming out of Hamas's mouth and everything coming out of the IDF's mouth as propaganda. Maybe it's not exactly 10,000, but Shane's right. It's thousands. The UN, as we've said tonight, is calling it a graveyard for children. But he's getting into an argument about what's the correct number. And that's how he's minimizing it. Not the thousands of dead people from the bombs. So I don't know whether he's clever enough to actually do this diversion on purpose or whether this is just what the Israeli zealot will always do. Because remember again, he's just done whataboutism, and you'll hear, we've got a couple of clips to play, that's an accusation he uses towards Shane at some stage as some kind of fucking defense.
Hamas. What happened on the 7th of October was absolutely unexcusable. But that doesn't mean on the next breath that I can decry and denounce the terror that the Israeli government, and you talk about the chant from the river to the sea, which is a term that I wouldn't use, and I wouldn't also use the term apartheid, but it was actually a very similar policy that is in the constitution of Likud that makes up
for sport and joy, for the bloodlust of killing Arabs.
Actually, Damien, let's think about what's happening in the more moderate West Bank, where every day aggressive settlers are moving into the West Bank, pushing Palestinians off what little land they've got.
Aboutism?
But it's about.
We're not talking about the West Bank. We're talking about a genocidal organisation.
You can't define the two.
So we're not talking about the West Bank. Well, we weren't talking about the Israel going into the music festival either. So he said he exactly did, and this happened so much. He exactly just did what he accused the other of. He accused others of stuff he had just done. I'm going to play more about. I've got a couple more clips of this to play to you. I'm going to play. There's a quite an interesting interaction between Bomber and Brooke Van Velden, where Bomber has an attack, a pretty good crack at ACT and their response to it. But anything you want to share as we go through, we'll have these pauses as we go through, mostly for water. They need to be fucking water breaks, or else we're not going to survive this. But yeah, anything you want to share?
You know the phrase, I wouldn't cross the road to piss on Damian Grant if he was on fire.
Yep.
I would cross the road to add more fire.
With fuel, with a bucket of fuel.
Like, just, oh no, the petrol's not working. It's whataboutism. No, it's about understanding that cause and effect. Like, for a man that gets column inches and time of commentary and that sort of thing, he's about a deeper thinker as a children's paddling pool.
Yeah.
Like I there's been comments in the chat. I don't know why Bomber puts up with him.
Yeah, it's interesting, eh?
Like it's sure it's fireworks, but I mean, fuck, he's just a monster.
Yeah.
Horrible, detestable person. Like, you could have a conversation like this. You could have the two debating sides of the argument here. But the amount of venom that he's put in this it's not meant for discussion. It's just to piss people off.
I think Damian Grant is the perfect example of, it doesn't matter what you say. If you say it loud enough, it sounds like you know what you're talking about. You know?
Yeah, and then I'm not listening. I've said my thing, but I'm not listening to what you're saying. I'm just going to say that.
I don't know if you heard it in that, but there was a point where he was going off on a rant about the evils of Hamas, and they were only there to kill Joel. And he said, but that's okay. And like, but that's okay. Like this throwaway, but that's okay. It's like, well, hang on. Do you believe what you're saying, or is this the rant you're supposed to do at this point according to this formula, because this is the commentator you are? Anyhow, let's go back and continue this story. This is Bomber having a go actually at ACT, and it's quite interesting because he's about to move on, and Brock kind of goes, no, I want to keep talking about this. And then, well, I'll let you have a look what happens next.
Brock, Israel has killed more civilians in 1 month than Russia has killed in nearly 2 years of war with Ukraine. Where does ACT get off claiming Chloe is an anti-Semite in the shadow of such an enormous mountain of dead civilians?
Well, we didn't do that. I actually think we have a responsibility not to inflame the situation. And to actually,
while the war crimes are going on, we should just be quiet.
I think it is our responsibility, especially when people are in leadership positions, like Chloe is, to actually tie-ho and just say, you know what?
Let's be gentle to the war criminals.
No, let's not use slogans that are used by terrorist organisations.
That's a bigger issue.
To fuel up and stir up emotion.
So do you support
on
the humanitarian
such an important issue?
Do you support the humanitarian pause?
I think we should look for humanitarian aid in Gaza. It would be really good to see a ceasefire.
So you support the ceasefire?
I do support a ceasefire.
Because I tell you what, the Israeli government would be very unhappy with that position, because they certainly don't.
That's right. And I think it's really important for us not to just think of, TikTok sound bites and say,
like the
there's
press
good
release
people, there's
Chloe.
really bad people. It's actually a very, very complicated, multi-generational war.
Shane, when Russia's...
And I actually want to talk about this.
No, let's get into how absolutely outrageous it is that you as a party have made the insinuation that Chloe is an anti-Semite. Let's talk about that.
We haven't said that.
That's exactly what you did. That's exactly what you did.
That.
It's not true. They did.
No, Bomber.
The insinuation is that she's not an anti-Semite.
What we have suggested is that it wasn't helpful. We have people in New Zealand.
It's not helpful. 10,000 dead isn't helpful.
Let her finish.
We have people in New Zealand, and I think this is very important, who do not feel safe. And we have a right for everybody of every ethnicity and of every religion to feel safe in New Zealand. Now, in Tamaki, as the MP for Tamaki, that has the largest Jewish New Zealand community in the entire country. And there are people in our community that do not feel safe, especially when people in our country are using pro-Hamas terrorist organisation slogans to stir up and whip up crowds. That has the effect of potentially creating anti-Semitism and creating racial division here on our shores.
So the problem
and
is
I actually think we have a responsibility to pull back on that emotion and acknowledge that this is a very difficult situation. Our hearts break for everybody in Israel and the Palestinian territories who do not feel safe and who are dying. And we also have to ask for those hostages to be returned to Israel.
Absolutely.
But we are not going to, here in New Zealand, have an ability for Palestine and Israel to fix those problems. This is
so we're too small,
much
don't do
bigger
anything.
issue than people here in New Zealand can fix.
So
we actually have a responsibility
if you have a
to have adult conversations
if you have
with
a
adult emotions.
No,
There we go. So I've got something very clear to share on this, but Chewy, that might have been the first time we've seen it in entirety. You are welcome to have a crack, my friend.
They really haven't solved the problem with AI's displaying emotion yet, have they?
I know. It's a very strange cadence, isn't it? It's like, and it seems quite. I don't know whether. And look, I'm genuinely not wanting to disparage her. I really am not. I've said this before. Her written work is good. When she writes a piece, it's quite good. Her spoken word, she seems to need to be reaching for the words that she's looking for, or it might just be the natural way she speaks. But it doesn't engender a sense of confidence that she knows what she's talking about.
No, I don't have a lot of criticism for what she said there. I just think it's weak. I think there's a mention of the fact that the Jewish community in her electorate might not feel safe. There's no acknowledgement of the fact that the Palestinian population of her electorate might be feeling some emotions as well.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to both sides it, then fucking do it. But you do it both sides.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong by saying this is a horrifically violent incident. People are suffering and everybody needs to chill out, and we need to do something about it. And we need to have a conversation about that without one side going, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. You know, remember the Holocaust. Can't criticize us. It's, you know, Damian Grant could get in the sea. Brooke needs to find a spine somewhere. I don't know, maybe there's one in her spare parts bin.
Maybe I can offer something to that, though. Because this is the thing I wanted to say. And Chewy, you're off Twitter now, so you won't see my tweets today. But she said in that conversation that it's kind of our job not to inflame the situation. And she said, you know, that what's happening with, for example, the chant or the language or whatever is creating racial division on our shores, end quote. Something else that she said in that conversation, she was talking about the chant or the slogan that Chloe Swarbrick said, and I put this on Twitter today. Brooke Van Velden said that Chloe Swarbrick shouldn't use words, quote, creating racial division here on our shores. And I asked, has she told David Seymour this? Is she going to suggest that her leader doesn't use words to create racial division in New Zealand? If not, why not? The biggest thing I got out of that was, if you're honestly saying to the public, Brooke Van Velden, that we shouldn't be using words to inflame a situation or to cause racial division, what the fuck do you think the whole ACT policy for the last 18 months has been based on? And does that therefore mean that now ACT is going to withdraw and apologise their treaty referendum, for example?
There's nothing wrong with a politician necessarily trying to be the calm voice in the room as well. It's just, you know, when people are most calm, when they're asleep. You know, it's okay to show emotion. We've come out of a time where one of the things that we really liked about our leader at the time was that she showed emotion.
Yeah.
You know, it's okay to sort of go, well, this is fucking horrible, and there's no real, I don't have a solution for it. But one side is bombing the shit out of the other with almost no reciprocation, and maybe it's a time to get the civilians out of the way. Like, where's the lie in that?
Yeah.
Like, and we're getting caught up on words and slogans and pointing fingers at each other and going, well, you're an Islamophobe, you're an anti-Semite. No, civilians shouldn't be bombed and killed and shot. Shouldn't be blown up in their homes. That's non-debatable.
Going into the next point now, and I sort of mentioned this earlier, this is where Shane talks about how Hamas needs to be a part of the solution. Have a listen.
No, because there was no solution. Because there is no solution to ongoing peace without Hamas being at the table. And I know that's very hard for folks to comprehend.
You're right.
As it was for folks to comprehend that ANC, terrorist organisation, National called them a terrorist organisation. They called Mandela, fucking Nelson Mandela, they called him a terrorist, as they did the IRA. as they did Bobby Sands, as they did McGuinty. But at the end of the day, long-lasting peace occurred because people, even if you were totally opposed to the ideology, sat on the table and reached a peace agreement. There is no peace agreement that will take place in Israel, in Palestine, unless you bring Hamas and the various fractions to Israel to the table. It's got to be a negotiated outcome, and whoever turns up to the table turns up to the table.
But Hamas don't.
There you go. And then the conversation goes on about Hamas don't want peace, Hamas don't want this, which is now another, I guess, trope or saying that gives you dehumanize the population, then you're able to blow them up more easily. One more clip to play. But first of all,
isn't it fantastic that even with the media blackout and the lack of communications coming out of Gaza, that Hamas have found the time to communicate their wants and needs directly to Damian Grant?
Yeah,
that's phenomenal.
Direct line.
Good effort.
The last part of the conversation we're going to show for tonight is they started to talk about solutions, and quite quickly, it's this whataboutism that Damien Grant thinks no one should ever use. It starts to talk about, for example, using various South African tropes, like the same kinds of things that were mentioned when South Africa was, trying to find peace. We'll play you the last 60 seconds.
If Israel wanted to exterminate the Palestinians, they could do so. They could have done so 100 times. They haven't done so. So what is the policy of Israel that gives you the impression that the state of Israel is determined for the eradication
the bombing of schools, hospitals, and refugees centres just this week?
If Israel wanted to murder Palestinians, they could do so. The reality, sir, is that they are not. And if you have a look at Israel, itself, you will find Arabs in the Knesset. You will find Arabs in civil society. You will find Arabs in every member of Israeli society.
I've heard this before.
If you go to the Gaza Strip, the only place you'll find Jews are in tunnels.
No, I heard this before when folks like me and others were fighting racist apartheid in South Africa. Those Bantustans aren't too bad.
The Bantustans are pretty good. They're pretty good.
We've got coloured folks. We've got coloured folks in Parliament, which we all knew was bullshit because they were collaborators.
Comrades, we must.
There you go. End of it. Now, I think Damian Grant didn't come off so well in that. I think Brooke Van Velden didn't come off so well in that. And again, one of the takeaways is I'm still wondering why when we debate, when we look at this, when the media asks these questions, the pro-Palestinian people are always put on the back foot and being forced to denounce the efforts of Hamas, which everybody does, which we do here. But the pro-Palestinian voices aren't asked or expected to do the same, which is why, going full circle back to the start of the show, if you're having these conversations in the next few days, weeks, or months, one of the first questions you need to ask is Israel committing war crimes right now in Gaza? If the person says Israel has the right to defend itself, if they won't even concede that observable truth, then you have an ideologue in front of you and the conversation is pointless. Chewy.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Hold two thoughts in your head at the same time. It's easy. Like it's playing devil's advocate. Like if you can't defend your own position against yourself, then get out of the conversation. You're not equipped for it. I think, exactly as Shane said as well, I think it's worth commenting. Yes, there is no peace without Palestine at the table.
Yeah, Hamas in particular. They're the government at the moment.
At the moment, I would love the people of Palestine to have the opportunity to have a better representative than Hamas.
So what's going to happen now?
Unfortunately, they might have a bit of trouble at the moment having a free and fair election.
Yeah, exactly. Where are they going to hold these elections? What school halls are they going to cast their votes in Israel? Do you think bombing the entirety of Gaza is going to lead to the structure, the ability to have another election to see who actual Palestinians want as their government? Of course it's not.
Okay.
What's the end game? I say this a lot to people, right? Whether it's my partner or my kids or even me, I sometimes stop and I go, what end game do I want here? Like, what do I want in an ideal world? What do I now need to do to get there? What does Israel want in an ideal world? And my question would be, is what they're doing today going to get them that? Now, I assume what they want is to be able to live free and safe in their homeland in peace with all its neighbors. I mean, I would assume that would be what they want. Do you think this is going to get you there? I suggest the answer would be no.
Pat, this might shock you. I've solved it.
Oh, good.
I've got a solution for this. Okay, so I think we can agree that the Israeli government and Hamas are both big problems in this. Like, if you actually got them to a negotiating table, someone's got to back down. Nobody likes doing that. So let's remove them. Let's remove them from the equation. So if there is a peace treaty to be debated, we take 50 random Israelis and we take 50 random Palestinians and we put them around a negotiating table and we make that binding.
Yep.
Imagine that.
The other
you
thing
have
we
been
do,
selected to negotiate the peace treaty.
So here's something as well. We're talking about how can Palestinians hold a election at the moment. Israel can. So how about citizens of Israel, Israelis, how about getting rid of Netanyahu? 75% disapproval rating at the moment. That could be a way to start to look towards ending this. How about that? How about someone else in charge? Israeli citizens have the power for that. Anywho, Kiwi Skirt says as we wrap up, thanks guys, appreciate what you do, especially listening to some of the rubbish out there so we don't have to. Very generous super chat, Kiwi Skirt. Thank you for the $20. Yeah, look, I do this a lot. I mean, it's been quite interesting actually, Chewy, having my partner away for 3 nights hiking, how much extra time I've spent in the studio. Basically get in here at 9:30 in the morning, stop for lunch, take the dog out for a run, come back, get back in here till 5, 6 at night, stop for dinner, have an hour break or so, and then get back down here and finish off. And there's a lot of stuff going on that we're going through at the moment. And half the time I'll say, I watch this shit so you don't have to. Other times it's just too much. There was some other stuff today that I didn't get to and didn't watch. It's not, when I say not too much, like not for me personally, just quantity wise, it's too much. So we'll continue to do what we're doing. Appreciate the super chat, appreciate the kind words. And I think that's me pretty much done for the night, Chewy. Anything else you want to wrap up on?
The next Israeli election is 2026.
Yeah. Well, 2.5 years. 2 years.
Yep.
2 and a bit. Because Christmas is only 6 weeks away. Holy crap. Okay, Fano. We're going to head off now. Thank you for being with us tonight. Any other chats you particularly want to get out there? Anything else you want to share up before we wrap up, Chewy?
There's been some good chats, but yeah. It's all so outdated now because it was all towards the top of the show. Love you guys, chat. I love how the vast majority of you can hold your shit together and talk amongst yourselves with these topics that we bring you. It is a frustrating time.
And remember, we've got Marilyn Garson tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. She's agreed to stay up late. It's past her bedtime. And have a chat with us live. She'll be live, so you guys will be able to chat with her. And if you're looking for some fun activities to do in the next 24 hours, maybe you could vote for us at the New Zealand Podcast Awards, nzpodcastawards.com/nominate. Nominate us for the listener's choice. It asks you for a link to the audio podcast. This is obviously the video podcast, but it's the same podcast just as the video. Look, you've even put it up. And you can see I put a link there in the chat, the podcast.apple.com, which is actually a link you can use. We're also on Google Podcasts, or on Spotify as well. You can use any one of those links to identify who we are. And that's about it. I think we're done. Thank you guys for tonight. I appreciate you being with us. I see the numbers as stay pretty much the same all the way through the show. It's a bit of a heavy show tonight. Sorry, not sorry. Can't do much about what's happening in the news. It is what it is. And it's the biggest.
We would love to do a show about, well, there's nothing to talk about.
Oh my God. There is a kitten stuck up a tree. And we're going to do
here's
that.
a 90-minute show that is just a looping video of golden retriever puppies. I will welcome the day.
And remember, Thursday nights, we try to, if we don't get too talky, open up Discord. So maybe you've got some stuff that's come up this week, some of the things we've been talking about. You want to share some thoughts with us directly on Discord tomorrow night. We'll do our best to open it up. I'm looking to have another co-host with me tomorrow night because Chewy's off on adventures. So it'll probably be me and someone else and Marilyn Garson for the first part of the show, or it'll just be me and Marilyn and you. But we'll see that tomorrow night. So we'll see you back here. Where's my girl? She's down there.
I'd just love to do a 90-minute show about how pretty my dog is.
Yeah.
But everybody seems to be really keen to just keep dropping high explosives on each other.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Do you think we could do that one night? What would we call it? Like the Dog Day Special or something?
What you can't see in that photo is just out of frame. Is someone's dinner.
Yeah, I noticed she came around on Saturday to visit us, and she could smell the dog food up on a table in the kitchen. She's up on her back paws going, my turn. Here's my one.
Yay.
Here we go.
When you find a floof sleeping in its natural habitat, do these two things. Number 1, move to the floof. Number 2, boop the floof.
There you go. A little bit of dog for you. My one's asleep down there at the moment. Okay, team. Thanks for being with us. We'll definitely see you in some kind of incarnation tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Thank you for being with us tonight. We'll catch you tomorrow. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.